resting 50 miles northwest of Lake Titicaca and resting below a magnificent sandstone outcrop known as a Peñon are the ruins that archaeologists have labeled Pukara. The stones that once built that magnificent city have long been used to build the houses of the people in the adjacent town. Today, the foundations of that once great city lie under 3 feet of volcanic ash and dust. In its prime, I believe, that city was known as Zarahemla. Welcome to another episode of Discovering the Book of Mormon through Science and Exploration. When first viewed by a Westerner in 1540, Pedro de Cesta de Leon reported, "What I saw at Pukara were great buildings in ruin and decay, and many statues of stone in the shape of human figures and other noteworthy things." A similar account was made in 1681 by Antonio Vasquez de Espinosa, who described the city's remains as their marvelous works. There were great proud buildings with many stone statues in the likeness of men and other creatures, very neatly worked. The website of the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art states, quote, circa 200 BC, Pukara was the largest settlement in the Altiplano north of Lake Titicaca, covering approximately 900 acres. U-shaped courts flanked by fine masonry structures are part of the complex. 3-dimensional stone sculptures depict blocky humans with accentuated ribs and prominent square eyes. Ceramics are slip painted in red, black, white, and yellow. Very little remains of the ruins of Pukara. However, at its original size of 900 acres, it was 4 times larger than Old Jerusalem. We know that the Nephites migrated to Zarahemla around 200 BC. Anthropologist Alan Kalata writes, quote, in the period between 200 BC and AD 200, Pukara grew to truly urban proportions and took on a distinctive cosmopolitan character, with elegant public buildings and fine constructed private houses. There is little doubt that Pukara was, at one time, one of the most important cities of the southern Andes, a major religious and secular power. End quote. Coleridge confirms, quote, the dates have been published in a variety of contexts as the temporal limits of the classic Pukara, 200 BC to AD 200, culture for their association with highly decorative prothicum and ceramics. Anthropologist Brian Bauer notes, quote, it was widely believed that Pukara was the center of one of the earliest and largest complex societies in the south-central Andes. In March 1970, I was a missionary in the small town of Juliaca on the northern side of Lake Titicaca. My assigned mission area included the ruins of Pukara, just 30 miles northwest of Juliaca. At that time, the Peruvian Altiplano city of Juliaca and Puno were still part of the Bolivian mission. Joseph Fielding Smith, then prophet and president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, wrote a letter to our mission, noting that our mission area, quote, at one time was the headquarters of the church in Book of Mormon history. Outside of the ruins of Pukara, I know of no other site that would qualify as a serious candidate for Zarahemla within the March 1970 boundaries of the Bolivian mission. The city of Zarahemla was of great importance to the people of the Book of Mormon. During part of its occupation, the city served as the Nephite capital and the center of the church. It also contained the Church's central temple, Mosiah 1:18. Pukara's public buildings were dominated by a massive temple that was erected on man-made terraces or walls. The Pukara ceremonial structure, known as a Qalasaya, was built with dressed stone blocks. Its 3 large inner courts were flanked by smaller rooms. Coleridge provides this description of the massive structure. Quote, the Qalasaya complex consisted of a series of stone-lined terraces and platforms rising steeply 32 meters, 150 feet, over the central pampa. The complex is in the form of a truncated step pyramid with both straight and curved walls, a series of various sized platforms, and a variety of interesting archaeological features, many of which are only partially exposed. On the uppermost platform is a series of 3 sunken courts running north-south that vary slightly in form, orientation, and scale. Having 3 large rooms and smaller rooms adjacent to it, and with a singular door to the east, the temple complex in the ruins of Pukara hints of having associations with true temple worship. We realize that from the artifacts that have been found at the temple complex, the people here worshipped a god who had the form of a human body. Stone statues portray their god with human head images with rayed appendages, an artistic convention used in the Old World to symbolize divinity. Other Pukara artifacts include the remains of sacrificial burnt offerings and ceremonial burners, and stone images of a man and a woman. Anthropologists refer to these images as a Yaya Uma, or Adam and Eve religion. There is also the image of a snake carved in stone. Of course, the story of Adam and Eve is a central teaching element in LDS temple worship. The Pukara temple complex was unusual in that it had a large open field next to it where a great number of people could congregate. Anthropologist Elizabeth Carrich found this area significant and describes it in this way. The central pampa, large grass-covered plain, abuts the easternmost low-level wall of the imposing Qalasaya temple complex that expands to cover an area of at least 300 meters by 300 meters. That's approximately 1 million square feet. The multi-tiers of the stone-lined terraces of the Qalasaya temple rise dramatically above the expanse of this area. Having a speaker standing on the east side of the temple and adjacent to the great temple walls, this would provide the speaker with a natural sounding board. The temple's public grounds, or central pampa, brings to mind the temple at Zarahemla, where a great number, even so many that they did not number them, gathered at the temple, for they had multiplied exceedingly and waxed great in the land. Without doubt, the open area next to the Pukara temple could have allowed ample space next to the temple for the people to have pitched their tents and opened their doors so they could hear King Benjamin speak. The public area of the Pukara temple had other features of interest in our attempt to identify Zarahemla. These are man-made mounds that were built on the perimeters of the temple's public grounds. There were 7 mounds in all. In the Book of Mosiah, we learn that so many people gathered at the temple to hear King Benjamin that not all could hear his voice, so he had a tower constructed. However, even with the aid of a tower, his words could not be heard by all of the people, so he had his words read throughout the great congregation. Obviously, in that day, the number of copies that could be transcribed in one day was very limited. However, a few copies of his speech could have been made and even read in various locations to the congregation. From atop the 7 mounds, located at the perimeter of the public grounds, the readers could have spread the king's message to a large multitude. King Benjamin loved his people. He was so inclusive that he took laborious steps to make sure that all the people could participate in the great meeting that he held. Throughout antiquity, it is hard to find kings who expressed real concern for their people and who cared in the least about the opinions of their subjects. Yet there is archaeological evidence that inclusive kings ruled Pukara during its early period. Anthropologist Coleridge studied the leadership styles of the Pukara rulers. She explains, the central pampa was originally used as a public space dedicated for the preparation and consumption of super household level means and was an integral element in inclusive leadership strategies during the site's early development. In other words, what we know about the early rulers of Pukara matches what we know about King Mosiah, and King Benjamin. They were inclusive leaders who treated their people as equals and let them participate in the decision-making process of the kingdom. They talked to their people and they consulted with them. Since inclusive leaders were so rare in antiquity, the architecture of Pukara provides additional evidence that it is a candidate for Zarahemla. By any measure of ancient politics, King Benjamin was unique among ancient leaders. He was so inclusive that his temple architecture was designed to allow all his people to hear his words and to consult with him. We read, "And it came to pass that when King Benjamin had thus spoken, he sent among them, desiring to know of his people if they believed the words which he had spoken unto them." The archaeological theories about the open space next to the Pukara temple certainly brings to mind the events of the Book of Mormon, where the king spoke from the temple walls towards the people who were camped in an open space. Coleridge proposes, "The central pampa was an area of interaction in the central ceremonial district and is used to infer both the motivations of early leaders and the role of the local population in the negotiation of social power. Patronal feast and entrepreneurial feast are inclusiary events in which hosts attempt to promote solidarity and equality by widely casting invitations to community members and supporters." As a whole, the people of Zarahemla did not take to heart Samuel's warning, causing the wicked city of Zarahemla to be burned at Christ's crucifixion. Subsequently, the repentant Nephite nation rebuilt the great city. Though only a small percentage of Pukara has been excavated, there are early indications that the entire city burned. Coleridge notes of the limited excavations at Pukara. Late formative period, BC 500 to AD 400, oriented at all angles. The soil was moist and loose with a high density of fired clay, 10 to 20%. Underlying deposits included different colored clays, a limited number of artifacts, and a substantial concentration of burned wooden beam fragments. We know from the Book of Mormon that the temple of Zarahemla was rebuilt after the visitation of Christ. Archaeologists believe that the Pukara temple was rebuilt sometime between 200 BC and 100 AD. Zarahemla had been a great city until the final demise of the Nephites. As pointed out in the first episode in this series, Pukara flourished until 400 AD, when it suddenly was abandoned, never to be occupied again. Discover more about the Book of Mormon by subscribing to this channel. By doing so, you can have immediate access to all of our video presentations. Or you can visit our website, christinperu.com. That's one word, Christ in Peru, where you can see our books, learn about our videos, and learn about our tours to Peru. Thank you.